Let's go live with Jack Kelly. Welcome to the one-of-a-kind LinkedIn live show that will help you with your job search and advancing your career. We will bring in educated career experts who will share their insights and give you inside tips on how to be successful in your job search. Now let's get into today's show with your host, Jack Kelly.
We're live.
All right, we are live. So let's go live with Jack Kelly. And hey, Eric, I want to hand it off to you so you could kind of introduce everybody, and we're gonna have a great, amazing session today.
Thanks, Jack. Hello, everyone. I'm nervous. I can't believe it. I'm Eric Young, and I'm here with a great panel today. First with Ellen Zimlis with Guidehouse, and I'll let each of them introduce themselves. And Marianne Bullion, who is also going to introduce herself with Bitcoin IRA. And they've got incredible experience. And today we're going to talk about crypto, ESG, and lots of other fun things. Thank you, Jack Kelly, for always hosting these. They're always a lot of fun, and I look forward to participating.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, so you know what? Maybe we could start crypto. If people haven't noticed, there's such a thing as Bitcoin and crypto. I'm sure you haven't heard anything of it lately because, I mean, oh my God, you can't escape, right, Marianne? I mean, the conversation is nonstop with it. Dogecoin, what is it? Dogecoin, Dogecoin,
Doge.
You know, so crypto, it's just, you can't escape it. So maybe you could tell, as an expert in the field, what's going on in the space, what's happening? Should compliance, legal risk people kind of move over there? Is this something safe and secure, and is growth? Well, what do you think?
Well, first of all, Jack, Eric, thanks so much for inviting me here to the panel. It's very exciting to be here, and I love talking about cryptocurrency. So it's an exciting time in the world. A little bit about me. Personally, I do work for a company called Digital Asset Group. Their primary brand is Bitcoin IRA. I'm their general counsel and chief compliance officer. Prior to that, I spent 8 years with the FDIC. Then I'm an attorney, so I was a law firm lawyer before that. Crypto has come a long way in the last 10 years. It was created to be some kind of alternative for people to engage in trade and avoid the central banking system. But as we've seen, it has turned into something completely different. Obviously, the regulators have gotten a hold of it. And while it was somewhat of the Wild West at one point, and maybe some people still feel like it is, it's turned into a highly regulated area and very exciting place to start working on investments. So you look at Bitcoin, which was the let's say the original cryptocurrency, meaning that it's decentralized, that it's cryptographically safe, and then also based on the blockchain ledger. The blockchain itself produces the coin, and then also is the accounting ledger that's transparent and open to the world, so that it makes it very hard to copy or fake these types of coins, right? So that's cryptocurrency. Now, what's happened from Bitcoin? Bitcoin, I think, originally should have been some kind of payment system.
That's what it was supposed to be,
right?
Right?
It was supposed to kind of be a payment system,
that you could buy and sell, but now it's $60,000.
Right?
You can't buy pizza anymore doing
so that. It's interesting how that came to be. I think it primarily Bitcoin itself was a cryptocurrency that was created with a limit, meaning there's only a finite number of Bitcoins available in the world. And so as other cryptocurrencies came into the world that were actually built to be better payment systems, Bitcoin itself became more of a value storage system. So more of an asset that acts like gold or something like that, and has its value based on popularity and market, the supply and demand type of situation. And then you see other currencies have come out. So you look at the Litecoin, the Ripple, those have become more oriented towards a better payment system. They're not finite. And actually the ledger system works faster, meaning that the transactions can go faster and faster. So they've actually built more cryptocurrencies that are better payment systems than Bitcoin. So Bitcoin itself is kind of so some companies are coming out using Bitcoin as a payment system. I've seen all sorts of transactions from people buying homes with Bitcoin, but if it's going to go up in value, it's at 60,000. What if it does go up to 100,000? Do you really want to use that as a form of payment?
Marianne, can I ask a question, maybe to throw this out to everybody? Because I imagine people have the same thoughts that I do about it. Let's say the last 9 months on Twitter, I kept seeing so many folks on Twitter saying, it's moving, it's going, it's moving, kind of this hype feel to it.
Yeah.
And if there's a stock, you base a stock on, okay, hey, we had something that happened, so we're going to get more earnings. We're going to have more revenue. Maybe we made this acquisition, and there's a methodology to say, hey, here's the PE ratio, and you have some metrics why you could value it. But to me, it's been saying, and I'm not saying this to denigrate, because I'll get all these Bitcoin and cryptos hating me and attacking me. But how, Eric and Ellen, do you feel from, Ellen working at a large, prestigious management consulting firm, Eric being a CCO for great establishment, like, how do you balance those two? Like, do regulators have to look into it and say, how are they getting to that level? Is this artificial? Is it for real? Does that make sense? Is that like?
Yeah, I do think that they're all different kind of coins, as Marianne has said, and some are tied to a currency, some are tied to a basket of currencies. So there are some that you can actually focus on more and get more of understanding the value. Some of it, though, as Marianne said, it's really based on the market. It's market driven. Someone thinks something is valuable, so they're going to buy it. The idea that Bitcoin would be as much as Berkshire Hathaway is kind of wild, right? Like, so if a Bitcoin went up to 100,000, and you look at Berkshire Hathaway, which to get an A share, let's say, I don't know what it is today, but let's say that's 100,000, you can go and see what Berkshire Hathaway invests in and how it gets
right.
There. You wouldn't be able to do that for Bitcoin, other than what the market wants for it.
Not for Bitcoin, but I mean, if you look at Ethereum and the smart contracts behind it and the stable coins, like you mentioned, that are actually backed by fiat and other assets.
Correct.
There are.
So I didn't realize that. So we just yes. So as opposed to, let's say, Bitcoin, you have others like Ethereum that there is something behind it.
Behind it. So yes, Ethereum is a smart contract. They call it smart contracts, but essentially, if I want to buy something, the cryptography within the blockchain actually allows the contract to be executed. So if I give they call it Ether when they refer to just the coin, but if I pay you Ether to purchase, bananas or something like that, from the public blockchain that the money has been transferred, or the funds, the Ether funds have been transferred, and so to ship the bananas, and we don't have to go through a bank, and we don't have to do any other paperwork. So that is a use case for that particular coin. And the stable coins like the USD coin and some of the new things coming out, those are actually backed by fiat or assets. Pax is one of the ones we have on our platform, which is backed by gold. So there is a value behind some of these. Bitcoin itself, it was the first, and that one is really market driven. But the rest of them, as they've come out, have more and more use cases and more value that's actually tied to them.
And some of the firms also come up with new products constantly that are tied to something else. The question is, do you like what it's tied to, or do you not like what it's tied to? And how volatile is what it's tied to? But that's actually how this, I think, compares to working in compliance anywhere or working in risk management anywhere, is understanding that product risk. What's the risk in that particular product that you're putting out, that particular kind of coin? And that's what you've got to look to if you're in one of those roles within an organization. I'm sure Marianne, that's what part of her job, I'm assuming, is to sort of go and look and understand what's there and where you're, what's the risk involved in any of the products that they have.
And I would say, Jack, to your original question and the way Ellen just described it, is when you say it's going up, what is it? Because there's so many different types of coins right now. The analogy I use is it's like the derivatives as they were coming out in the 90s. No one really understood them. There were so many different types. Some are tied to underlying assets, as Marianne described. But people think of Bitcoin immediately. They think of fraud or crime. So it's the goal from a compliance point of view is understanding it, understanding the risk, demystifying it for product managers and others and the board as to what is it, and most importantly, how do you book it? How do you mark to market if you're trading it, if you're custodying it from a banking point of view? So that one word, not to sound philosophical, is important, just like it was for derivatives, but it's doable. And then the final point, we can talk about this more, is where will leverage come in? Because at some point, people want to get quick returns and leverage against it, I predict. And in that sense, that creates more risk. So risk reward, but it's understanding what it is, if that makes sense.
No,
That in your practice, Ellen, is there like a lot of?
oh my God. We do this the biggest issue that I have is that the crypto firms take my people, because they have been trained on how to do this. And I'm always I'm a little fearful when we start working with them that, okay, I have to, you're not going to take this person, right? We'll give you that person to work on this. You're not, and then sure enough, they offer them a lot of money, and I wind up, sort of in this constant process of that. But it is a big area. And also, I think that there's a maturation level that's going on, right, with these firms. Some of these firms are starting, look, we just saw an IPO that was enormous.
Right.
You want to have, firms need to have infrastructure. They need to understand different lines of defense. They need to understand how this all works, but don't want to be a bank. And so what I think what I hear a lot is, okay, Alan, this is really good. We need this. We need to get licensed. We need to do this. But remember, we're not a bank. You don't have to give us the same stuff that a bank has. And so part of the analysis is, well, there's risk management, and forget you're a bank. Every organization needs risk management. How do you do that? How do you make it fit right for the organization? How do you make it address the understanding of the risk, and then having the mitigating controls to manage that risk properly? And every place is going to have a different risk tolerance. Every place is going to have, a different way that they'll different risk acceptance, but you need to have the infrastructure in place and the tools to give people the ability to manage that and make decisions relating to that.
And there's
so that's kind of no different.
So many different types of risks attached to these cryptos, whether it be privacy, cyber,
yes,
KYC.
Well, and market and credit, just like everything else.
And each one is different, so you have to know each coin to really assess the risks, especially.
Exactly.
I also think it's interesting to point out, I think, Jack, you had mentioned, back in the day, people looked at it as something that was only used in crime or that it was unregulated. And you can see today, fast forward many years, not only is it regulated in the sense that the SEC and the CFTC are in a, I wouldn't say battle, it looks like the SEC is winning over who's going to actually regulate cryptocurrency companies, but it is being regulated. The FinCEN and the MSBs are all over making sure that these companies are regulated as an MSB. The New York, obviously, with their BIT license, they are making sure that everyone becomes part of their regulatory organization as well. And so when I'm talking about risk, a lot of time I have to kind of demystify, like you said, I have to convince people that what once was maybe unregulated or used in crime, they say it's untraceable, perhaps maybe if you're in the dark web or something like that, but for the most part, because it's a public ledger and you're on your computer and your computer has an IP address, they're traceable. The police are becoming savvy in how to use, how to find criminals who are using cryptocurrencies. So the regulatory landscape not only has changed, but has increased. So if you're talking from a perspective of someone who's looking to work in this industry, yeah, I would say 5 years ago, it was a little bit scary because we didn't know where it was going to go. But at this point, there's enough regulation in there to keep everybody employed.
Well, now
and build a career from it. So it's
right. Even the new anti-money laundering law that came out
right.
January, 2021, very specifically said that virtual currency firms now have to have a BSA program.
Right.
They are a financial institution under the BSA. And so when that you've got, I don't think there was much question. I think most Bitcoin, firms had that. Most crypto firms had it. I had some version of it. At least, if not all, they may not have had all the pieces or have it, sort of the governance around it as you might want, but now it is a requirement, a federal requirement that you have that. And so, and I'll tell you, one of the parts of that is that the government wants more innovation. They want to encourage innovation. And that's that's actually part of that statute too, to encourage innovation within every federal agency. So, I agree with Marianne. I think this is not what it used to be. It's not your father's Bitcoin. I think it's a different world from where it is. Cash is still pretty untraceable too.
Yeah. And that's still actually the most popular form of, exchange used by the criminals. I mean, the criminals are not off cash. They realized that Bitcoin was interesting for a couple of years, but everyone's caught up to how to manipulate that and figure it out,
like a registered
track it and trace it. Exactly.
And the January proposal is also interesting because, at least according to some commenters like Square, I read their comment letter, they're actually saying the KYC rules go beyond the rules for cash and regular banking activities, in which the KYC is required of the counterparty, not just of the underlying customer. So
we perform more due diligence on our crypto customers than we do our traditionals. We do all sorts of alternative assets that you can invest in your self-directed IRA. So, but our gold customers don't have to go through near the KYC that a crypto customer does. And that's primarily because our crypto partners are FINRA regulated and they require it. And even before the new laws came out, in order for us to get bank accounts, in order for us to get insurance, we had to have BSA AML policies. We had to be able to show that we knew how to at least self-regulate if we weren't regulated by a specific body. So for me, it's never felt like an unregulated field. I think it was just perhaps the regulations were unclear, or for me, it was actually more conflicting jurisdiction.
Right.
Am I a MSB? Do I need to talk to the SEC? Which of these regulators do I need to talk to? Not do I need to talk to a regulator at all?
It's so interesting, Marianne, because it reminds me of there was a time where hedge funds really came to the forefront, and I remember that at that time as well, I would speak to candidates about hedge funds. They're like, "Oh no, this is a little scary. What is this all about?" And then within no time, they're like, "Jack, I want to work for a hedge fund. I want to work for a hedge fund." It became this sexy kind of cool thing to go there. So I guess that's a general evolution in these things. And like, for instance, for Eric and Ellen, I've seen a proliferation of all these interesting fintech companies. And that seems to be another kind of hot growing area. Like, what are you seeing? And Marianne, I know you're crypto, but you do other things too. Are you seeing a lot of like cool, interesting companies emerging that are competing with the banks and offering, a lot of job opportunities too, just like crypto will be?
I mean, absolutely.
Right.
It's how do we make payment systems faster? How do we make them safer? How do we make people feel more comfortable with them? I know, for example, our company, when you call us, well, first of all, getting an account is very quick. And it doesn't mean you don't go through KYC, but it's all technologically integrated. So we don't have to necessarily go outside the system. So the number of people that it takes to process an application is less, because everything is technology based. The ability for us to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and really actually it supports the whole remote working kind of mindset, which means that you can get rid of some of the overhead in old real estate in big cities, that kind of thing. So they're able to act more nimbly and not within the confines of this traditional structure where you have to have a team of 10 people in order to review an application, because now we have computers and AI doing some of that work for us.
But I think the fintechs are a little different, at least the newer fintechs are a little different maybe than hedge funds, in that the focus is often on the consumer banking, right?
Right.
It's often on the underserved or the
correct
those who aren't. So that if you think about a Marcus or Hazel or any of these new entities that are coming out, it's really about, and PayPal, for that matter, it's really about serving people who haven't been served or can't be served, haven't been able to be served in the current major financial institutions. And there's a lot of money to be made there. There's a lot to be done, but it also has, and I think the attraction to some people is that it's serving a community that hasn't been served before, and that they can touch it more. That it's easier for them to understand that and to sort of connect with that than institutional investing, and
Even internationally in some of your not first world countries, so to speak. I mean,
Yeah.
you everybody has a cell phone, but not everyone can get to a bank.
And the question
And so that just facilitates what you just pointed out, Ellen.
right.
And is a bank even needed going forward over the next 5 to 10 years? And we've seen this trend before of disintermediation versus the role of banks going forward. And the banks always end up being part of the equation. But with the financial crisis of a few years ago, the question is, do we need or want banks because there's so much interdependencies in the payment system? So perhaps these new players, I'm predicting, will create less risk, not more risk, but we'll see.
So Eric, that's a really good point. So do you think it play out where either A, the banks won't have as much power when you have all these new emerging cool companies in the fintech space, or are the banks that have a lot of money will just say, you know what, we'll just buy you guys out and integrate it, and now we have Marcus, or now we have whatever
It's
kind of
usually
thing. What do you
The combo, at least now.
A little bit of
Yeah.
everything, you think? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that if you're a true, person who really likes crypto, if you're a true crypto person, you don't want to deal with the financial you sort of are against them. Like if you looked at what happened during the financial crisis 10 years ago, you're saying, look, you did that because you leveraged all these mortgage-backed securities. You did these things and we didn't know where our money was. And we actually, the average person may have been hurt, their pension fund might have been hurt, there are other things. We want to see what we've got. We want to know where it is. We want to know where it sits. We don't want securitization of crypto. We don't want any of that stuff. That's you banks
and personal control, not passing on the control of your financial future to maybe even an advisor. People really want to take the power of their financial future into their own hands.
That's
and I
an
think
interesting point, right? I don't, but like what Ellen was saying, like it's interesting because I wonder if you follow through, because my kids are Gen Zs, and they're gonna have zero interest to Marianne to speaking with a live financial advisor who's gonna be like, hi, how are you? Let's talk. No way. They just want to pick up their phone and do it.
Yes, but but Jack, the other side to that is you have to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
So there's the book
There's
Random
danger.
Walk Down. Right.
Yeah.
Random Walk Down Wall Street. I don't know if you guys know that book. It's a
Sure.
guy, Burt Malkiel, from Princeton, who wrote it. He's in like its 12th edition or something. And his position was always, there's no way you're going to know an individual stock. You might learn about one stock, but you can't know the whole stock market unless that's what you do every single day. You spend your life focused on that, right? And so maybe you like some particular stock, but whatever it is, GameStop or whatever, you kind of like something, but you can't possibly know how the market's really going to move. So you have to diversify. You should go into funds. You should do different things. It's the same concept with some of the coins as well. You can't know all of them unless all you do is really study them and study this, study the market extensively. You're never going to know like what other, what someone who is a professional in that space really knows. So I don't care if you're a Gen Z, I don't care what you are. It's what you invest in. You should, it's always good to be able to have someone who that's their job to study this and to help guide you one way or the other. But, some don't want to do it.
That's likely to be a lesson that could be learned from all this, Ellen, is that when people do take some of the control over for themselves and see what the risks are, I mean, you're exactly right. Some people are highly tuned into these areas. And then some people are just fans. I mean, especially in crypto, they've got huge fan bases that people really believe in one coin or the other. I don't know that I've seen people like stock or other investments in the same way as this is almost this
double-edged
rock
sword,
star
though.
type
It's a
fandom.
double-edged sword though, because people love a particular stock and they'll sell it, pump and dump.
Which is sort of right with the Wall Street bets.
That's going back to your Dogecoin. I mean,
Right.
that's exactly what happened there.
And it goes back to, I know it sounds silly, but what is it? And it needs to be communicated, educated, whether regulators, investors in particular, because they also need to understand their own risk tolerance. And then the firms like yours, Marianne, need the understanding of where they're heading in terms of risk tolerance, which is great that you're there because you're helping with the infrastructure. But there's so
you'll
many
see, I think career-wise, you'll see that most of these fintechs are hiring legal and compliance, and I think that they're doing it before maybe a brick and mortar bank would have done in the past. You know, you build the operations and you make sure that that's compliant, but do you hire a general counsel, you know, at the start of your business? But
Don't
you're
wait,
seeing with
yeah.
you're seeing, yeah,
Don't wait till
there's a
they
lot
have
of
to, they're
overhead,
forced
right?
into it.
There's-
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Usually you're not paying for that kind of overhead, and how much legal work do you really have? But these fintechs have a lot of regulatory
Yeah.
work and a lot of regulators they have to deal with. You need somebody who knows that arena. So it's created a kind of different career
Mindset.
landscape for the regulatory
Yeah.
and legal leaders, because they're being brought into the risk scope of the board and looking towards the future of the companies
Can-
earlier than they would have perhaps with other companies.
Can I throw this out to all of you guys? So do you think in part with the ascendancy of cryptocurrencies, with the whole Wall Street bets, Reddit, you know, Robinhood, GameStop phenomena, is this kind of because we're in this bubble where people are at home, they have stimulus checks, white collar workers who are working from home have this extra time and want a little action, that it's created this combination of things that people are just speculating like wild? And if it wasn't for this whole pandemic, that wouldn't happen. And that is everything kind of artificially, you know, creating this big balloon that could bust because it's
You know, it's
unsustainable.
possible because the issue is not unemployment, actually, it's disposable income. So if people are sitting and have disposable income, you know, they may be getting stimulus checks and they have disposable income. And if they're there and they're looking at this, it might be something like that. I think, but I just want to go back to something, because I think that the firms are hiring people in these spaces. The question is whether that the people in these control functions have enough juice at the organization and can really make decisions and have enough impact. And are they, like, I see some places who are paying people very little. Some places pay a lot.
Alan, you're so right. I can't tell. You'll see, right? I see a job description. We want this. And it's like, zoom, all this, you know, 20 things. And then at the end, you say, oh, it's a compliance associate with 3 to 5 years experience.
Yes,
They're
Yeah.
like,
absolutely.
what?
It's like, you want someone to do that who has 3 to 5 years experience
What?
on that?
Come
Are
on.
you kidding me? You know, that's
Oh my God. All the time.
they want to pay for
Right.
someone who has 3 to 5 years experience.
All the
And so
time.
Yes.
You
That
get what
is-
you pay for.
Yeah.
that is what I see as the balance. And that may,
It's
you
a bit
know,
of short-sightedness. I think, again, it's the idea of how much capital do you have to spend in a, you know, legal and compliance is always looked at as a support role, right? You're not generating the revenue, and it seems that people on top don't necessarily want to put the infrastructure in to build their company.
And they probably
for,
don't get
you
it
know,
too,
greatness
right?
5 or 10 years. Yeah,
Right?
it's
Like a lot
different.
of the
This-
techies
Or
and
why can't I
engineers,
hire an
don't
outside
get it.
counsel law firm instead of
Yeah.
an inside counsel? And I
Yeah.
always say, well, because the inside person's going to know your business, and you need to know your own operations to
Yeah.
figure out how to get regulated. Your outside counsel is going to not necessarily have that type of
Now
inside
that
knowledge.
inside counsel or compliance officer still has to have a voice and the ability to
Mm-hmm.
say yes or no. And at, you know, $50,000 a year, 3 to 5 years experience, the question is, will they have that authority
and will
No,
they have the
no, yeah.
maturity to make the judgment?
and the maturity?
Yeah.
Right? Will they be
Or
able
the
to
guts
say,
to stand up to the
Right.
CEO.
It's
Exactly.
hard. I mean, it's hard
Exactly.
for, like, you know, a grown adult like us here, but let alone, you know, someone 25, you know what I mean? To with only a few years of experience. So yeah. Hey, Ellen, can I go back to something you said about disposable income? So another big trend is ESG in
Yes.
terms, and ESG, like I think most people, and I'll put myself in that camp. I'm not really well educated in this space. You know, you think of, okay, green energy, climate control, but this is a big growing area, and it's much more textured, right? There's so much
it's
more.
much more, there's the E, right, which you think of as environmental issues, the S, which is social issues, which includes, you know, as we went through just this week, what we saw with George Floyd trial, and the G is governance. So social is diversity, inclusion, social is many things within social, culture of an organization, et cetera. And then there's the G of how you govern all of this and how you look at all of this as a whole. And so I think this is a big space. The concern, or at least what we've seen today, is how much of it is talk, how much of it is paper, and how much of it is real. There's something called greenwashing, like whitewashing, only green, you know, where you're sort of talking about our firms just sort of saying that they're doing stuff on the climate, but not really actually putting their money where their mouth is. Or you have you've got a goal towards something in 2050, you know, and that kind of thing. And so how do you really looking, but I do think I feel more and more and more, it's not just the law firms who talk about it on LinkedIn or, or other places. I think more and more there is reality coming to this. It's not fully matured yet, but I do think it's a big space, and that people who have a compliance background in general can absolutely be successful in this space.
I'm encouraged by it because it's another way of saying long-term stakeholderism as opposed to short-term shareholder capitalism, which, the reality is maximizing profits at the lowest cost, and compliance ends up being the expense budget that's significantly cut. And whereas ESG is looking out for society, looking out for the safety of employees, looking out for the right technology, and governance at the end of the day, because the G is not just the board, it's compliance, risk, and other controls. And so I think it is here to stay, particularly because the S part is society, and society, like last week, and I think going forward, will continue to be very vocal, to scream, so to speak, for these stakeholders to be seen and protected. And the typical firm, whether they be financial institutions, energy companies, et cetera, have long deprioritized, because of short-term gains, the importance of E, S, and G. So great for compliance, because in this environment and this administration, I think, going back to the regulators, is there'll be more supervision, more scrutiny, and more enforcement.
Speaking
And,
about the
the
new
employees
administration,
want to see it, right?
Yes,
Employees want to know
absolutely.
they're working for a place
Yes,
that
yes.
feels this. And so our employees a stakeholder. In some ways, some firms would say employees are the most important stakeholder,
Oh.
but it is because you can't have a firm without employees.
it's such a change, Alan, right? So like Coinbase, we talked about that earlier. So Armstrong, the CEO, was went on record saying basically, hey, we don't want to talk politics here. We don't want to talk social issues here. And if you do, you're free to leave. And it wasn't acrimoniously, so you're free to leave. We'll give you severance, and you can go your way. But you have other companies that are just the opposite, where they want to discuss it. And particularly, I noticed, I'm a Gen Xer, but I definitely noticed younger millennials, and I'm kind of generalizing here, and Gen Zs. That's what they want in a company. They want a company that has the same purpose, the same values, and
Ethical
it's an
values.
interesting trend how that's happening. Whereas I think,
I'm no,
I'm sorry.
I agree, Jack. I'm curious to see how let's say a smaller company, how are they going to afford those kinds of programs? And then, I think this is an area of the law that seems to be even younger than crypto.
Yes.
Yeah, is it? Is it?
Wh-
It's been
in
around,
my
but I guess
opinion, just because it's
yeah.
been around, but you don't see, like I said, the SEC and CFTC are regulating crypto. Who's regulating ESG? I mean,
I
where
don't know
are
who is there
the
is there
rules and the laws, and
something?
it seems
Standards
to be
not
more
yet.
of a self-regulatory situation. And I think that certain companies that have the the portfolio and the balance sheet to be able to afford some of these programs are able to get into this space. But what about some of the smaller or medium-sized firms that just aren't going to be able to put any money necessarily towards those functions? And you still see the laws, the laws haven't changed. Such that corporate boards are still beholden to their shareholders, and making sure there's revenue. Do you cut that revenue to promote these programs that aren't required by law?
I would
And how do you justify some of those actions? And yes, if you have the shareholders that support these new types of rules, but just like you said, I mean, if a company comes out against something or for something, and then they lose half of their market base because of that stance, then how do the shareholders feel?
Or activist shareholders. Anything you do can be attacked by an activist shareholder, right?
Sure.
So if you spend the money on that, you can be attacked because you don't have short-term, success.
I think that's the issue, because it's too shareholder centric, and the management will react faster to what a shareholder thinks than what society thinks, what the employee thinks. And I think these are great points, because in some ways, these laws and regs, particularly around employee safety, food safety, have been around forever. It's just that the firms have deprioritized, ignored employee safety, food safety, and many other aspects. And the G comes into even greater play, I think, and the S. So there's so much focus on the environment and climate change and certain aspects of societal change, which is important, but it's the existing laws and regs that are now coming to the forefront, which have been around a long time because these are long-term requirements. And the shareholder needs to take a step back, which I know they won't, but that's where the board comes in to reprioritize what the firm's objectives need to be going forward. Even for small companies that are privately held, they need to remember that it's the employees' safety and day-to-day activities that keep the engine running.
Eric,
Well, that's risk management. That's general risk management.
To raise two points that you bring it up. One, I'm curious what you guys think. So, President Biden has announced he's championing, I want to say it's like a $2.5 trillion infrastructure program, and a large chunk of it is going to be allocated towards green energy and clean energy. And if that goes through and gets passed, do you think that would be a game changer? And he's saying that could create millions of jobs because these are people who work on solar energy, windmills, you name it. Do you think that could be a reality? Do you think it get passed? And if so, would that be the needed impetus to really get ESG on the map for real? You know what I mean? Because if you're putting 2 trillion, it's not all for green energy, it's for building highways, bridges, all that kind of stuff. But do you think that could really be the game changer?
I think maybe you need a statutory change to say who a publicly traded company is responsible to.
Right.
Right. Because otherwise you're always going to be subject to third party, shareholder suits. And so if you can be very clear as to what your responsibility is, and it's not unfair for an organization, for a board to say, hey, this is who we are responsible for under the law. We can do what we like to do, otherwise, and try to do as much as we can. But at the end of the day, we have a duty to our shareholders. And whether it's short term or long term, we can make that, we can make that valuation. We can try to, show that. But without sort of more to say that you should be taking into account interests of other stakeholders, then I don't know how you actually really get through some of this.
So it's interesting. So what you're saying is that you could have all the money flowing into it and all this, but if the companies themselves aren't saying, and the board aren't saying, we're prioritizing it and this is important, it's going to be hard to make changes.
Or this is how we measure these different things. Yeah. This is how we prioritize them, and these are our legal obligations.
And convincing your shareholder that it's going to add to the bottom line, that by participating and making sure that you're following all the environmental and social rules, that your company is actually going to be more profitable instead of less.
So it'll be interesting where state laws come in, because to Ellen's point, it's the states that mandate what a board is responsible for, Delaware being the perfect example.
Right, Delaware.
And the business judgment rule prevailing, but it's the shareholder suits that drive the behavior, if you will, of the board and management. But interestingly, just a real anecdote is the states, after Sarbanes-Oxley and a lot of these major crises, quickly passed laws to shield directors from shareholder lawsuits. And if they really wanted to look longer term, they've got the ability to also change these laws to hold the boards and management more accountable, but also change the shape and direction of longer term objectives, not just short term shareholders. So it'll be interesting to see where all this money is going, including the state legislators.
I'll give you an example because I wrote about this in Forbes. So there's this hedge fund called Inclusive Capital, or some variation. I might be spacing out an exact name, but then there's a whole organization behind it with some global heavyweights, politics, professors, what have you. But for the hedge fund side, what they're doing, hedge fund / PE, they were going to old school companies, let's say like Exxon, and they, instead of just trying to do it from scratch, they're going to these old school companies and try to retrofit them to make them more environmentally friendly. So they're taking a different approach and saying, just like you guys were saying, hey, this is going to be accretive to shareholders because we're taking these measures, and by doing these measures, we're still going to have a great company, but we're going to be better for the environment, and it's going to be better for the bottom line. So I thought that was kind of an interesting way to tackle it. rather from the ground up, they're going to these old, these companies.
So Jack, I think that's all really good. The question is, how do you really know whether someone's done it or not? How do you enforce
Right?
it? So that's what the SEC
Yeah.
is going to focus on, right? They're not, so far they haven't said, here's the standard. They're just saying, if you're putting something out, you better be consistent with what you're putting out. So if you have your ESG report, or even, whatever your, your disclosures are, and you're saying you're going to do X, Y, and Z, then you have to be doing X, Y, and Z.
Mhm.
They have not yet said what you have to do or what the standards are
Right.
for what you have to do. But if you're going to say it, you better do it.
Like Coca-Cola, like Delta, some of which backpedaled because they were
Yeah.
very vocal on one day, and then had to kind of walk it back another day because of short-term shareholder
Right.
demands and returns.
Hey, Ellen, from your vantage point,
Mhm.
running a large management consulting firm, I know we were talking a lot about crypto and Bitcoin and fintech and ESG. What other trends have you been seeing lately in terms of where kind of these, Wall Street financial services, those spaces, where they're heading, what's going on, what's new, what people may not be aware of?
Fraud is one of the biggest areas.
Okay.
Fraud, first of all, because of all the stimulus, products that are out there. But I think unemployment fraud is massive in this country right now, which is state, and who's being hurt is basically the states and the state budgets for that. Having said that, the financial institutions who have accounts for for the people who might be receiving it or might erroneously be, not. There's a lot of account takeover.
Do you guys do work on that?
Oh, tons of it.
Okay, can I get a quote for you for one of my articles about it? Because I write every month about the job report, and then usually the weekly, like today I wrote about the weekly job report. And yeah, they're talking in the last 3 to 6 months, all of a sudden they're talking about fraud, but they just talk in general terms, like not like what exactly is going on, what they're doing.
There's so much stuff going on in that space. Account takeover is really quite a big deal.
What is account to takeover?
Meaning that somebody takes over your account. They say you are at, look, for unemployment fraud, I'll just give you an example. There are all these people who are getting the identities of dead people, but going in and saying that they are, have lost their job. And they go in and to the states and they apply for unemployment insurance and they are getting it, but it's going to somebody who's dead. And and so there's a lot of that goes on. There's a lot of things like that. So we work with lots of, both because Guidehouse is both the public sector side and the commercial side. We work with the organizations, the commercial organizations who have to look for fraud, right? That's your obligation as any financial institution to look for that. But the true victims can be the state or the federal government, so that it comes out in all different ways. But if you think about all of these stimulus programs, the point is to get the money out to the people who need it. Right.
They do that with the PPP too, right? There's
all of the programs are like that. You want to get them, these people, there's a reason for these programs. People are in pain and need and in great need to get that money. But if you get it out too fast or you get it out, you have to balance the control impact versus the controls around putting out that money with getting the money in the hands of the right people. And so maybe the governments want to go one way or the other and they say, look, I'll risk some fraud because I got to get that money to people who need it.
Right. Isn't that what they did with the PPP? They wanted to get it out, and then when you saw who got it was intended for small businesses, and then you had all these massive businesses,
But the size of the business is one thing. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean there was fraud involved, right? The size of the business is just that's how the statute
worked out. Maybe the statute wasn't written properly,
right?
And more people got the stimulus than maybe we thought should. But there wasn't as much fraud, I don't think, in that. I think when Ellen talks about the individuals and the fact that you can go onto the dark web and you can buy people's, copies of their IDs and all of their personal information, and then all you have to do is set up an account in their name, especially, in our space, in the fintech space, where, you don't have that person-to-person contact in the brick and mortar institution anymore. You don't have people walking in to apply for an account. You have them doing it online.
Didn't that happen in a prison where there are a lot of inmates who conducted like this massive fraud? Is that an urban myth, or that really happened?
I will say there are many legendary stories here. Yeah. The percentage, though, is even though it may be a high number, the percentage is actually pretty low given the amount of PPP that went out. The percentage is probably quite low. It's just the numbers are high. Yeah. But it's not just that one, right? It is all really well intended. It's the idea is the government is making a decision. I need to get money. People need
Mm.
this money. This is how we have to do it. And there's always going to be a risk in that there will be some fraud because
And the irony of calling it the infrastructure bill is not having the infrastructure to get it from the federal government through the states to ultimately the people that need it the most.
so that, I mean, so there are, but
So
what I see in this
fraud.
world right now.
What other stuff?
lots
What
of
other cool
fraud.
stuff do you, if you want to say fraud is cool, but what other
No, it
interesting?
is, but you know, like, okay,
interesting
looking at human
stuff.
trafficking. Frankly,
Yeah.
that's another area that on the financial services side, there's a lot of focus on trying to identify human trafficking. No institution wants to have human trafficking going through their place. No crypto firm wants their coins to be used to support human trafficking.
No.
It's very hard.
Or the
to-
terrorist financing.
or
Yeah.
exactly,
Same
or any
thing.
of this. Correct. So that there's a lot of focus. I see a lot more focus on human trafficking right now. Not the terrorist financing isn't always there.
Yeah, that was a couple years ago. We've really moved on to human trafficking in the past
It's
couple
not,
of years.
I mean, there's still no one wants to support terrorism either.
No,
Right.
we don't want to support either. But yeah,
That's right. We're not going to say
that
that, right? But
on. I think
I do think that human trafficking is and maybe some of it came out a lot because of the Dreamers or because of the focus on immigration, where you
right.
did see how that, really led to a lot of human trafficking and people trying to get out of countries and get into the United States. And so there's been a lot of focus on that. It is not easy to have alerts. The alert you might look for in a financial services transaction monitoring system, it's not so easy to pick up human trafficking because what can look like human trafficking can also look like very typical activity. And you usually need other information to get you there, some information from the government, a name or a place or something else that might show. There's some you can find, but it's hard. And I think there's a lot of focus on that you see, and people want to do it. We do this, we do it for companies. We also do some of it pro bono because this is a very big issue and our people want to do this and really want to feel good about the work they do and apply what they've used in other places to focus on this area. So I see a lot in that space too.
And is the
Amazing.
third party risk a big part of the trafficking equation, or is it more in terms of KYC or just
It's
the
transaction
broader-
monitoring. You can see it, but you have to, at a hotel, all of a sudden there's a lot of activity at a particular hotel, but you need usually more information than the bank will have in front of it. So there's got to be that's a real public-private partnership issue, because if they can tell you certain things and you can look for certain things, then you can actually look for those patterns. But some of the patterns may look like truckers coming in and out of a hotel, too. You have to just sort of know some of these different issues and be able to address it. But I think that that's an area that there's a lot of focus on, a lot of like consortiums relating to that, a lot of NGOs that are really very, very vocal, and rightly so. But I do think the immigration issues have pushed this a bit to the forefront.
Do you see any other kind of trending things that most people like, when you bring it up, I bet you people who are watching you now, watch you later, they're going to have their eyes open to like, I never thought of it. I didn't.
Consumer protection. I mean, the CFPB is going to be, I think, very, very active.
And there's a new person coming in, right, to run it now.
Yes, right. And so I think that they actually were, even last year, there was a lot of activity in consumer protection, but we've seen, first day letters that are coming out fast and furious right now to organizations. And because there are so many bank and non-bank lenders in this space and providers in this space, that there's a lot of focus on consumer protection across across all different ways. And so whether it's a money service business, whether it's a payday lender, whether it is a non-bank mortgage company, all of those, I think there's going to be a lot of focus on consumer protection issues.
Is it because they feel there were problems before and they need to address it, or
Not
just
I think it's the new administration.
They probably are, and
you
more
like how
debt.
diplomatic I am about it, Mary?
No, but more people
Yeah.
taking on debt, right,
Yeah.
and greater and more focus.
and
on
not
this.
enough enforcement. And
Yeah.
I think the other issue too, which is a subset of consumer protection, is privacy, particularly in Europe. And privacy touches everything, whether it be the crypto or the or just day-to-day financial activity. So, I think Europe is further ahead than the U.S. in terms of not only having the laws, but certainly the enforcement, the sharp
Enforcement. Mhm.
I think,
Does-
but and as Marianne said, on the dark web, if you can buy people's, how are they
IDs.
getting it on the dark
Oh,
web? How does it get there? And so that's a big issue.
Do you think
cybersecurity.
then, I think we started kind of going this direction a little bit, putting politics aside, but just being analytical about it, under Trump, and he was very vocal and honest about saying, hey, I'm not for regulations, for every one new regulation, we're going to rip up two. So you put it out there. And do you think with Gensler, and I can't recall the gentleman's name who's heading up the CFPB and others who are coming in, do you think, if nothing else, they almost have an obligation to kind of look back and see, hey, what may have happened over the last years? And then, you know what I mean? So you have this other thing going on too, just to make sure you don't have
There's
this.
plenty just in enforcement,
Yeah.
right? So if you just said, forget creating new regulations, and there may
Right.
be new regulations that should be out there, but I'm not even commenting on that. I'm just saying just enforcing what's on the books
Mhm.
is the issue, right?
Existing laws, because they've been around forever.
There are plenty of consumer protection laws, but now saying, okay, you can't go someplace to someone's workplace to try to, enforce your judgment against them, or to try to do, what you can.
And Jack, to your question of retroactively looking,
Yeah.
rules are one thing, penalties are another. So these investigations may have carried over from the Trump administration to the Biden administration and the agencies under them, but the outcome, guilty, not guilty, deferred prosecution, or worse, I think the monetary penalties are going to be much higher, which again, from
Eric, on AMLA, they increased the penalties for money laundering, right?
Yep.
And they increased the amount that a whistleblower can get.
exactly.
So
There's some big payments going out. What's the last, like $50 million or something? I thought I read. I mean, there's some.
well, I think the biggest one may have come from a Swiss bank, where the individual who was a big whistleblower got 30 million or something like that, but he spent a year and a half in an orange jumpsuit eating bologna sandwiches too. I mean, he was part of the problem, and he also spent, I think, 18 months in jail, but got one of the biggest whistleblower, awards ever.
Now
So
sorry, Alan, I would say on whistleblowers, I think one thing, and it's not easy, but the sleeper issue is retaliation. The rate of retaliation is just.
Eric, you've been
exponentially
working. Have you
jumping.
seen that internally with, or know, heard through the grapevine internally of that happening to people?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And there's lots of surveys from the ECI and others, which from companies directly around just the exponential jump in not just the fear of retaliation, but actual retaliation. And the worse it gets, the less whistleblowers will be allowed to escalate these issues. And going back to everything we're talking about, fraud, dark web, all the wrongs of what companies are doing are not surfacing up to the board and others. And so now is a great opportunity for Congress and state governments, global governments to really tackle it, because they know it's a problem. They know it's an issue. They need whistleblowers, meaning employees, day-to-day employees, to raise their hand without the fear.
I think retaliation is one issue, but one of the other issues I've seen with some of the people I know who've spoken up is, outside of that organization, what about the next organization they apply to and their personal reputation? And is another company going to say, "Oh, we're going to hire a whistleblower"?
Yes. Exactly.
And if they get their name in the news, and what's their career going to look like after they've brought these issues to light in one situation, and is that going to derail them or cause a problem? So it's not even the retaliation of the company they work for. It's what about the rest of their life and the rest of their career, and how other people will perceive their actions.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
I mean, Jack, I don't know if you see that in your work, if you see people coming to you looking for a job who've been whistleblowers and have found it hard to find work again.
I have. There's certain people, who great jobs, doing well, and just couldn't get right back. Just couldn't get back on. Once they kind of off that ladder, it's really hard. It's tough because no one's going to come out as a hiring manager and say, Jack, I'm not going to hire this person because they're a whistleblower, but they'll come up with other excuses why they're not doing
Not the
it.
right fit.
Right?
Not
It's
the
going
right
to come up with other stuff.
It seems to work well.
For everything, yes.
Yeah, we're going to keep looking. Let's see who else is out there. So it's wild. small world. So for the whistleblower, but actually I have a disclosure, I guess. So my sister-in-law, she was running this whistleblower program and she's just stepped down. So kind of I'm pretty familiar with that program, and it's interesting.
You mean a
I
third
think it's
party
done
program?
what?
You mean like a third party whistleblower, like a place?
Oh no, for the SEC.
Oh, for the SEC.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So I mean, it's an amazing program, but yeah, and they've done such good work, but it's for some people who bring things up. It's sad. It's
tough.
really sad.
Yeah, exactly. That's the right word.
It is, but it's also a double-edged sword as well, because people have used it as a sword,
Yes.
right? And so I've seen situations where people raised it and there wasn't value, there wasn't really any merit to it, but that
Unsubstantiated.
was how they protected themselves,
Right.
Mhm.
right? And they could get a buyout, or they can get some deal, someone who wasn't doing very well, someone who wasn't, but they could raise something, and then no one wants a retaliation for doing it. You shouldn't get retaliated, even if it turns out the whistleblower is wrong, right?
Sure.
Right. Many times a whistleblower can be wrong about something, but that can stain somebody too.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
they're not necessarily protected if they're wrong.
Right.
Right. Right.
But also, but the person who they have made the allegations against is stained.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
There's got to
And
be
so
the
it's
due
a
process.
right. You want to have a really good
Yeah.
process end to end on that, because it can be so painful and so have such intense damages
Just-
for all sides.
Yeah.
Ellen, it's interesting you bring that up, because I've definitely spoke to candidates who they had claims made against them, more of saying something or not, not necessarily got engaged in a financial kind of misappropriation, but just maybe made a comment or said something inappropriate.
Inappropriate sexual comment. or
And
something, yeah.
boom, they were kind of shown the door, and some of them never, found another role. Now, I don't know enough about, it's one of those awkward conversations. I'm not going to say, oh, Eric, tell me, what did you say? What did you do?
Right,
It's
right.
very uncomfortable for everybody involved. But that's, I guess to your point about sometimes when people bring up issues, maybe, kind of opens the door, like what
And
really
that's why
happened.
I call it a sleeper issue, because what we're discussing is it impacts people's lives and also suppresses the problems of companies, whether it be fraud or otherwise. It's very powerful, and addressing it somehow will bring to the surface, put sunshine, as I call it, to disinfect bad things.
This is amazing. It's over an hour. We covered so
Wow.
much territory. I mean,
Wow.
this is really, seriously, this was, I think, I don't know how you feel. I think this was just amazing discussion. I think we brought up so many topics, so many issues, shared so much information. I think we've turned people on to a whole lot of areas that they may not have thought about. Before we end, is there anything, Eric and I didn't maybe bring up and ask you, or anything that you really feel, hey, I'd like to add before we end?
I think we covered it, man. I think we spent.
Covered a lot, right?
Covered a
Covered
lot.
a lot of ground, which is good, because this is what we're
Mhm.
trying to accomplish here. So people who are watching it, there may be a whole lot of people who thought, crypto, I don't know. And then after hearing Marianne, she's like, you know what? Let me take a look, and maybe that's where I want to pivot my career. Or they hear, Ellen talking about ESG, they're talking about all those, interesting different things that are going on. Say, you know what? I'm really passionate about the environment. Maybe this is something I never even thought of this as, moving my career in that direction. So I think this is like a nice benefit that we could help people, because we're still in a pandemic and people are still kind of either in between jobs. They've been sheltering their jobs, just waiting it out to see what's going to happen. Or I don't know about how, your interactions with folks. There's so many people who tell me that, hey, I don't know if I want to do the same thing I've been doing for the next 5, 10, 15 years. You realize life is short and fragile. I want to do something different, and I want to do something meaningful. And I want to pivot. I want to reinvent myself. So that's what, I'm trying to do with these, kind of LinkedIn Lives, just to open up, so that people can get ideas and thoughts and figure out what to do, what's going on, how I could change my career, change my life. So, and I think, wow, you guys offered so much valuable information. You probably not even, like, if you watch it again, you'll see what I mean. It's like just chock full of really actionable, and you know what? It was like really actionable advice. You really gave tangible, stuff for people to take away. So this is terrific. I think this is amazing. I'm so glad that we were able to do this.
Yeah, I agree. I love these panels. They're different every time, but very substantive and a lot of fun at the same time. So thank you, Ellen. Thank you, Marianne. You
Thank
were
you,
both
everyone.
fantastic.
Thank you,
and
Jack,
Jack,
Eric.
as
Oh, my
always.
pleasure.
Ellen.
This is great. I really appreciate you guys taking all the time out. This is fantastic. Well, thanks.
Thank
Great
you.
meeting you all.
Okay.
Take
Bye
care.
now.
Have a great day.
Aloha.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, Jack.
Hey, I think that was great.
Yes.
What did you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Are we still recording?
I don't know. No, I don't think so.
Okay. No, it was very good. I thought lots of discussion, and we covered so many topics. So
All right. All right,
Thank
bro.
you.
I think we may still be on, but it's so good saying good stuff. That this was awesome.
Yeah.
This is like the
Yeah.
wrap up. So yeah, I think if people, I'm not sure if we're still on it, but if we are, I hope everybody enjoyed. I hope they
Fine.
learned, and I think, wow, seriously, a lot of great information. A lot of great information.
Next month, another lineup, very different topics, but stay tuned.
Yeah. All right. See, that's a good coming attraction kind of thing. Excellent. Well, you know what? This was great. I mean, wow, Ellen and Marianne, so much value, so much
Yes.
information, so much
Yes, yes,
intelligence.
yes. Very different backgrounds, but at the same
Great.
time,
Great.
lots to offer, different perspectives.
Great. Excellent. Well, thanks so much, Eric.
Yep. Thank you.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Hope you enjoyed this episode of the WeCruiter podcast. If you want to check out other great content from WeCruiter, make sure to visit us at wecruiter.io. That's WECRUITR.io. We offer tons of great resources for job seekers and professionals, so make sure to check us out today.